Hey, welcome in.
Welcome to the Arrowhead Addict podcast.
We are here coming to you live.
The Kansas City Chiefs are going to the Super Bowl. You only win a Super Bowl 2 times every 5 years, right? Oh! The warm-up act is over. Let's bring in Melissa Etheridge, massive Chiefs fan. Melissa.
Super Bowl champion, 2-time Pro Bowler, and Trent Green. Trent Green, how you doing?
Hey, what's going on, guys?
He picked it up! He picked it up! He's gonna
And we'll see you next week. But until then, as always, go Chiefs.
Welcome into the Arrowhead Addict podcast on this Tuesday edition. This really is a Tuesday edition. Got married on Saturday, went to the Chiefs game on Monday. I'm joined by JB Brisco, as we always do on these Tuesdays. Brisco, how you doing, man?
I'm doing fabulous, Sterling. Just a couple of married fellas talking about some ball. You know what? I never really got a close look at the ring there. We may have to break that down at some point. But as Renee and I got to be really what felt like honored guests at your beautiful wedding, kicked off the weekend in good spirits. We got what we needed out of the Chiefs in prime time. You're just making the rounds as the up and coming mayor of Kansas City that you are. So it's a beautiful thing. It was a beautiful weekend. It was close enough to a beautiful Monday. I certainly can't complain.
I will say this. Not is this just for Nat? I'm also married to the game, because that's why I'm here on a Tuesday after the wedding. You know why? I love ball. Love ball. And what a great game for the Chiefs overall. This was the most complete game the Chiefs have had all season long. I want to get into all of that. Obviously, there were still the red zone struggles. There was a missed field goal. There was an interception that went off of JuJu Smith-Schuster's hand. I mean, it was not perfect by any means, but if you want to talk about a game where the Chiefs controlled, where the Chiefs did not necessarily let up, where it felt like almost in all facets, they were the better team. Even on some of the kickoffs, I was very impressed with Harrison Butker almost forcing the Saints to take one out at one point. I was like, that's a perfect kick by Harrison Butker. Maybe we're starting to get a little more comfortable. Like Dave Tobe has been talking about, you always want to kick it out of the end zone almost at this point, saying, hey, just let him get it at the 30. But they're finding new strategies here. So I thought there was a lot of important questions answered in this game. I think the most important one, obviously, is how's the offense going to look with the plethora of injuries to what they thought was going to be their wide receiver 1 and their wide receiver 2. What it looked like is apparently JuJu Smith-Schuster can do what he did a couple years ago in Kansas City. And also, it sure looks like Travis Kelce, the washed rumors were completely unfounded. And oh, by the way, Kareem Hunt's apparently good again. So maybe we are back in 2019. I'm not sure.
We're even further back if you're doing it by the baseball timeline. It really is, in so many ways, a throwback and a look ahead. I agree that it's a complete win where you do have this. I'll give you a fun fact here just right off the top. All 4 active Chiefs wide receivers all 4 active Chiefs tight ends took more snaps in this game than either Mecole Hardman or Sky Moore. They ran some 14 personnel. We got Jody Fortson a catch before a wide receiver had a catch in this game. Yeah. And I think you have a little bit of an inclination as to what the offense could do from here on out. I don't think you're going to get that game plan copied and pasted throughout the rest of the season. I think we could still see another wide receiver added to this mix. There's still a lot more meat on the bone from Xavier Worthy that, frankly, Patrick Mahomes didn't take in this game. I understand why. We can get more into that as time goes on if we need to. But they're undefeated. Only the Texans in the AFC have only 1 loss, right? This is, in many ways, the best-case scenario entering the bye week, and that is with it explicitly not being the best-case scenario in terms of 3 of their top 4 weapons entering this season. It really is a remarkable stretch of football. I'm just as curious as anything to see what it looks like after the bye.
I want to talk about the defense a lot more because I think what they have done has deserved to hold the lion's share of the conversation. I want to talk more about Mahomes and what this game represented for him moving forward. Before we do that, though, want to give a shout out to Underdog because football's back and it is here to stay until February. And by the way, it's not just for NFL. They also do great stuff with playoff baseball. I've been throwing some bets down on some playoff baseball, on college football as well. I love everything they have right there. Over 1 million fans across 33 states got in the game last year. I'm making picks right there on Underdog. You can win up to 1,000 times your money just by choosing higher or lower on your favorite player's stats. Big higher guy, I've noticed. Huge higher guy. Yeah. You can pick the lower button, and every time I go lower, I seemingly win more, which is probably something that should tell me, like, hey, but let's be real. Life is too short to bet the lower. You got to go with the higher. Way more fun. But going on Underdog is super easy, straightforward. Sign up is a breeze. So you can head over to Underdog's simple-to-use mobile app or underdogfantasy.com, and you can sign up with promo code Arrowhead Addict. And if you do that, Underdog will give you a free pick to use on your first cash pick'em, plus up to $1,000 in bonus cash when you deposit. That's Underdog Fantasy promo code Arrowhead Addict to claim your new customer special of a free pick and your deposit offer. Must be 18 plus, 19 plus in Alabama, Nebraska, 19 plus in Colorado for some games, 21 plus in Massachusetts and Arizona, and present in a state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply. Void in Colorado. Concerned with your play? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.ncpgambling.org. Arizona, 1-800-NEXT STEP, 1-800-639-8783, or text NEXT STEP to 53342. New York, call 24/7 Hope line at 877-8-HOPE-NY, or text HOPE-NY 467-369.
Did you make your ringtone Patrick Mahomes saying it's like talking to Sterling from his post-game press conference?
That was so good. It's like talking to Sterling, and then of course before the game he has to say, "Go to bed, Sterling." So yeah, you better believe we played that on radio today. That's good. A popular one to play.
Good. I'm glad. I'm hopeful that you guys have made it through the Cuts archive, and you may be able to hear that this week. Because I thought of you, of course, immediately of the greatest week of Sterling Holmes' life continues. It's stew season, and I'm happy to be here for it.
I love to go to bed, Sterling, and I'm like, I'm not doing it. I'm still up, baby. We're going out on a Tuesday to watch the Phillies and Mets playoff baseball. We're not stopping. Also, shout out Daniel Harms in the chat. Daniel, Ruben, CLL. Always appreciate you guys. Harms, you know you're my man, dude. Harms is at the wedding as well, so appreciate you, Harms. Lovely for you to show up. You and your wife was a lot of fun. You and Brisco at the same table. Yeah,
Renee and I think probably talked to Harms and his wife more than anybody else over the course of the wedding. It was wonderful.
Yeah,
as is true for, I believe, all three of us, and something that I don't think Dan will take offense to. His wife is cooler than he is.
Yeah, I think all the ladies have that in common, right?
Yeah, I think ultimately that's a win for all of us. But yeah. I mean, it's simply true. And again, I assume Dan probably knows that, as I do, as you should.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the defense, because I think the defense deserves, again, the lion's share of the conversation. I had an interesting conversation with Jeff Chadiha today. You know, Jeff, I love Jeff Chadiha right there, NFL Network. It was just in passing at the station. It wasn't this long-winded conversation, but he asked me, he goes, is this Chiefs defense elite? And my initial reaction was, well, yes, of course. Look at what they've done. I know they've not gone up against the best teams in the NFL. I understand that they faced, the Ravens the first time with Derrick Henry in that iteration. They faced the Bengals in week 2, which for some reason the first 2 weeks of the Bengals is just always an utter disaster. Injuries. But I'm like, this is also the NFL. You play who's in front of you, and they've done what they're supposed to do. But it wasn't even necessarily a pushback. His was, are the players elite, or is Steve Spagnuolo in the scheme and the coaching elite? And I thought that was a little interesting. Again, we didn't really go deep into this, but I had to go on air, of course. But that left me pondering a little bit. And I'm like, I think it's hand in hand. Like, it doesn't matter if George Karlaftis or Mike Dana aren't elite edge rushers, and they have struggled if the totality of the defense is putting up elite numbers. Doesn't that just show that it's almost working in tandem? Right? It's Steve Spagnuolo's scheme. He knows what fits. You look at what they've done against the run. Well, yes, Dana and Karlaftis, for the most part, have really struggled to get any sort of pressure against opposing quarterbacks, especially early, right? Which we'd like to see more of. What has Bijan done on the ground? What's Alvin Kamara done on the ground? And overall, what has Chris Olave or Jamar Chase done through the air, right? So I'm sitting back going, I get the thought process of, well, are they elite based on just the names and the players they have? You have Chris Jones, you have Trent McDuffie, and if you want to throw like a Nick Bolton in there, I'll entertain it. They don't necessarily have like the elite names, but they all work so well together. In my mind, it creates an elite unit. So I left that conversation going, you know what? This is an elite defense. They are, again, I'm not saying they're the 85 Bears, but if we're looking at in today's NFL in 2024, they're easily a top 5 defense. And I think they're top 3.
I think there's a bunch of interesting stuff in there that I want to unpack. I think my top of the line pushback, and this part's subjective, so this is the most person to person element of it. I don't think the NFL has an elite defense in it right now. I don't think there has to be. There has to be a best defense in the league by default, but I don't know that there does have to be one that you call elite. And if you did, I don't even know who it would be. The Chargers have allowed the fewest points in football. They've only played 4 games though.
Broncos maybe would be considered.
The Steelers and Broncos have both allowed 73 points in 5 games. I'm not breaking down where those points all came from and all that. Those do have some elite players. The Vikings defense is in kind of a similar spot, I think, maybe to where the Chiefs are, where I think the biggest star on that defense may be the defensive coordinator with what Brian Flores has done there. Now, obviously, that is not to denigrate. You're right about Trent McDuffie, Chris Jones, elite football players, elite at their position, the best defensive tackle and a top 3 cornerback. And you do have, I think, 3 to 5 elite corners in the NFL right now. And I was thinking about this exact question totally independently earlier today. And I was thinking about Jalen Watson. So Jalen Watson, I'll give you this. McDuffie, Watson, Reed, and Cook all played 100% of the snaps against the Saints. That's not super out of the ordinary, but it pops off the page. Like, oh, these 4 guys in the back of the defensive backfield, they're out there every single rep, and that's how Spags wants it to be. Justin Reed is in a top 3 safety right now, and Brian Cook isn't either. And Jalen Watson is not L'Jarius Sneed. This is where the whole thought for me was earlier today. L'Jarius Sneed's a better football player than Jalen Watson. But Jalen Watson has not cost the Chiefs points this year that L'Jarius Sneed would have prevented. And that's kind of simplistic because you could take it at another level. Well, having L'Jarius Sneed allowed Spags to do so much interesting stuff schematically, and that's true. I haven't seen a dumbed down version of this defense. I haven't seen them forced to do things detrimentally that they would have been able to do if they wouldn't have had to do if they would have had L'Jarius Sneed. I'm sure, this is anecdotal, but I'm confident. I'm sure Jalen Watson has gotten more help than L'Jarius Sneed was getting last year. I'm sure that 1-to-1 last year's L'Jarius Sneed and this year's L'Jarius Sneed have been better performances than what Jalen Watson has had so far this year. But it hasn't reared its head to this point, and I don't know if it's gonna. That's kind of the neat thing about it, is that you have an elite defensive coordinator, an elite defensive lineman, an elite cornerback, and then a good linebacking core, and really good linebacking core. This is not a Nick Bolton backhanded insult or whatever, but just kind of going through the process. A really good group of linebackers that have had their ups and downs in coverage, all 3 of them, to be fair.
Yeah, Leo had a little bit last night.
Leo had a little bit last night. Tranquil's had his stretch. So that might be the weakest. The linebackers in pass coverage might be the weakest part of this defense right now. And that should be a compliment because Jalen Watson looks like a legit number 2 NFL cornerback. Even if he's corner 40, I'd take that right now in terms of, you got to have 64 of these guys starting every week and functionally more than that. Najee Johnson has been up and down. Joshua Williams didn't see a defensive snap. Chris Roland Wallace got 1. I don't think that's necessarily a changing of the guard for him and Williams right now, but all of that in totality, I don't think I would say the Chiefs defense is elite right now because I think you have to be at such a level defensively that you're the thing winning games. The Chiefs defense is really, really close to that. If they shut down the Niners after the bye, whenever they get the Bills a few weeks later, if they're able to limit that offense too, maybe we do need to go ahead and move the narrative for a team that's so offense-centric. The defense does deserve all of this credit and all of this conversation. The E word is such an interesting place to put a pin in it and to evaluate. I'm an enormous fan of what it is, but that's how I'm hedging my bets there.
Yeah, and that's I think a big conversation is how do you view the word elite? Is elite only being compared to the 2000 Ravens and the 85 Bears? Then no, this is not in comparison. I have a little different, I guess, comprehension. I guess we could always pull out the dictionary and go through this if you'd actually like to.
Sure.
But again, I think there's still going to be this gray area of I consider that historically elite or historically important or historically great, right? When I say elite, I'm viewing this in the 2024 iteration of defenses. And again, I just think the schematic advantage that Spags brings, even if some of the players necessarily aren't the biggest names or might necessarily have not performed the way we thought some of them might have so far, overall, the defense has been the calling card of this team. And I do think the defense has been a reason why they have won some games. I'm just so impressed. Again, this is a fun conversation to have, and even throwing out the fact that we can start considering them in that category, even after some of the losses, right, of L'Jarius Sneed and Willie Gay Jr., I think speaks volumes about the next man up, and obviously the Chiefs finding guys who can fit their scheme to such a high level. And it's why Jalen Watson has been such a, I wouldn't even say addition, just his growth has been incredible this year. I mean, he looked atrocious during training camp and during the preseason, right? I mean, we're all sitting here like scared. We're like, oh my gosh, CB2 is getting torched game after game after game. He's been great. It was fun last night watching. I mean, Justin Reed, I think, has been actually a little up and down this year compared to last year.
Yep.
But he hasn't cost him anything. Right. Like Drew Tranquil, I think, has played a lot worse than last year. Not cost him anything. Mike Dana and Carl Loftus have played worse than last year. Not cost them anything. But I will say, Leo's been great. Turk Wharton's been really, really good. Turk really Wharton's been outstanding.
Really good.
Brian Cook's been good, but I don't think he's been incredible. Brian Cook had a really good interception, by the way. That was fun to watch. We were in the suite, and it was in the corner of where the ball was getting thrown, so we could watch the entire thing unfold, and it was like in slow motion. The ball just hung in the air so long, and you're watching it, and Brian Cook just goes up with that one hand. And at the time, we all did the same thing. I'm like, I don't think he was ever touched.
Yeah.
And so we were all like, okay. They never called it down. They let it go for a while because he kind of got up and celebrated. And then I forget who it was next to him. It may have been Watson. Was like, dude, you've not been touched. Go. And all of a sudden he went and it was awesome. But we saw it on the review. His foot hit the receiver's dome. Like his foot was on the guy's helmet, which technically counts as down by contact.
That's contact.
But yeah, I've just been so impressed with the Chiefs overall defensively. L'Jarius or not, Charvarius or not, they find ways.
And they haven't, again, this is a little bit of a spinoff of some things we've both already said, but they haven't been limited by any of those changes either. This has not been a growing pains first 5 weeks for the defense. Most of the time under Spags, you have enough moving parts. The first year of kind of the entire defensive backfield reload, Justin Reed's first year, even like Juan Thornhill getting healthy, you can go back through the majority and maybe all of Chief seasons under Spags and say that the defense is significantly better in week 12 than it was in week 2. And I'm not sure that's going to be the case this year just because they have been, week 2 was, I guess, probably the low water mark, but this defense also has been put in bad positions by its offense on multiple occasions, which is also a part of that conversation. But I don't know that they're going to be more impressive in week 12 than they have been through the first 5 weeks because I don't know that there's that much further for them to go. It feels like they are achieving at peak team defense right now with 2 superstars on the field, and I'll give Spags and Dave Merritt 2 superstars on the sideline.
Before we talk about the offense, I don't know if this is true, but I do wonder this. With the lack of pressure on the edges, the lack of winning early, right? I'm not saying that they necessarily don't want to win early, but I wonder how much of that is like, you know what? Just stay in your lane. Like, don't let the big play happen and stay and focus on the run. Because they've done such a great job against the run that I'm wondering if like Carl Loftus and Dana, who we know they're not typically quick winners to begin with, Carl Loftus last year was a lot better, and Mike Dana actually, quite frankly, was too. Again, I'm not necessarily trying to knock them here. I'm actually trying to almost wonder if I can find a way to give their slow sack numbers and pressure numbers some credence here. I wonder if it is almost a schematic difference of, all right, you focus on the run. Let Turk and Chris Jones up the middle. Let those two guys be the game wreckers when it comes to putting pressure on the quarterback. Carl Loftus and Dana, stay in your lane. Don't let Bijan get outside. Don't let Alvin Kamara just crush you on these outside runs. Do you think there's anything to that?
I think there definitely was against Baltimore. I'm not sure I'm there for the rest of the season at this point because, they have been excellent against the run. They've also largely been in spots where teams have sort of let the running game go as the game has gone on, anecdotally speaking. It has been rebuffed early. The Chiefs have eventually, the offense has made a mistake to keep the other team in it in most of these games, really nearly, I guess, against New Orleans too, but ultimately not quite that punishing. I think right now, I do still think it's a matter of Chris Jones is getting doubled constantly and is wreaking havoc constantly, which is the biggest beneficiary for Tershawn Wharton, who's been excellent in his own right. I think there could be a little bit of contain on the scramble arguments. I don't really think that does anything for me. For Kirk Cousins, high ankle sprain, Justin Herbert, and Derek Carr. I think Chris Jones is just, when he is a wrecking ball up the middle, that's the play. It's a little bit of a longer path for Dana and Carl Loftus. And I think more than anything, we've just kind of seen some of their limitations get taken advantage of at this point.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about the offense now. And I want to talk and start with Patrick Mahomes. Was this his best game of the season? Because to me, it felt like it, even though he didn't have a touchdown and he did have the interception on the goal line. I know it was really funny. I actually had a bet. It was both quarterbacks to throw for 225 yards and both quarterbacks to have 2 touchdowns. Well, Mahomes hit the yardage and Derek Carr hit the touchdowns, but in between, they did not get it. If only it was combined. Combined would have been a lot closer right there. But this was maybe the first game of the year where I really felt like Mahomes made the traditional Mahomesian plays. Some with his legs, of course, the diving Superman to pick up the first down, which, by the way, I was at the game and they kept saying field assist spots the ball here. How the bleep did field assist not help on that one when he was 2 yards past the first down and the Chiefs still had to challenge?
I forgot he had to challenge that. Good question.
I'm seriously, I'm befuddled by that. Every other play at the game, you're like, field assist has changed the spot to here. But on that particular one where he was clearly 2 yards past it, Andy still had to challenge. That was befuddling. But you did, in my mind, see a lot of the Mahomesian throws. Some of the plays we're used to seeing, the ability to go through his reads a little quicker, to scramble and move around and get out of precarious situations while also using his legs to perpetually be one step ahead of whoever is chasing him and always getting the exact amount of yards he needs to get. I don't know where your thoughts are there, but this almost gave me comfort, even without the touchdowns. And I understand the interception. Again, from my angle, it did not look like it was necessarily on him. Again, you can maybe correct me if I'm wrong here. But I left that game feeling a lot better about the state of the offense and particularly where Mahomes is at. Even with this season being 6 touchdowns to 6 interceptions, I think he's trending the right way.
Yeah, I think that's probably right. I might end up making the argument that Baltimore was still his best game. He had the brain short-circuiting pick to Roquan Smith in the middle of the field. I was just double checking to make sure I remembered that correctly. And it was like that pick was bizarre, but that was kind of the outlier for a game. He didn't hit 300 yards in that game, but he had 8 incompletions, including the pick. So that might have been like the best quarterbacking game. But Monday night, last night, oh boy, right?
Yeah.
I think my last 72 hours have been long, dude. I don't know how you're here.
Yeah, Friday night the rehearsal dinner was wild. Did I tell you that Casey Wolf showed up?
I saw that. Yeah.
Sorry, before we get to this, this is just a funny story.
This is worth it.
My wife, my wife, Natalie. At the time, she was my fiance because it was Friday night, of course. I had no idea. She apparently booked Casey Wolf to come to our rehearsal dinner. We were at a brewery called Dubious Claims. Awesome. Dubious Claims. Shout out to y'all. That was so much fun. And all of a sudden, I look over, and Casey Wolf is just waltzing in with his big hips. They do not
intimidating at all. Him walking in, just doing those pelvic thrusts at your rehearsal dinner.
Yeah, I'm like, dang, girl, don't look at him. I mean,
yeah, exactly. Hey, my eyes are over here. Can I listen?
He's
This is
built,
an engaged
he's
woman.
stacked. I mean, let's be real. That suit cannot smell good, but
in fairness, neither do you most of the time.
Hey, tough but fair. Okay. Sometimes I spill a little bourbon on me. It happens. It was so fun. I had no idea. She surprised me with Casey Wolf. We had a great time. The rehearsal dinner ended up being just insane. So much fun. So wanted to give a shout out to Casey Wolf. That was really fun. And then we saw him on the field and we're like, do you think he recognizes us? Like, hey,
hey, we got married. We did it.
Yeah. Okay. Now go back to your Mahomes.
Oh yeah. Clearly I think last night had the most Mahomesy magic moments, right? Like you saw the rabbit out of the hat on the scramble and the dive that you just took us to the play-by-play through when he was miraculously 2 yards short despite being 2 yards beyond the marker. With the ball actually crossing the play, I'm sure it was actually close. They got it right eventually, whatever. But it did feel like he was doing some of the stuff that you want him to do in those moments. He also had a couple Xavier Worthy bombs that were available to him, and not like pause the video and he sort of looks open, but Mahomes' eyes are on the other side of the screen. There were at least a couple of those where he probably should have taken it, including on that scramble, by the way. Now, in that instance, on the scramble, he did what was the slightly safer thing to him, which was to maneuver through all that traffic, which is not safe for any quarterback in football, but he keeps doing it successfully. He navigates traffic, gets the first down. Nobody's feelings are hurt about that. For me, I want to put a pin in that because Worthy keeps getting open, and he's getting open on real routes. It's not just gadgety stuff. And so for me, I know this is kind of spinning where we were just at into the future already, but that's what I want to see in 2 weeks. That's what I want to see through the bye week. And it's not like they're going to just go get a bunch of reps in down in Texas or whatever. But through the bye week, I want the coaching staff to see what Xavier Worthy has done to this point, and then to work with him and Mahomes in whatever way necessary to start to take advantage of some more of those opportunities, because that's the thing that's still been largely missing from this offense. And JuJu has the explosive play and the 50 whatever yard long that solves it a little bit. But those deep shots to Worthy, we've seen a couple, right? If that gets added into where this offense is, plus you get a Mahomes that's a little bit better at navigating the traffic, even as you can see that he doesn't trust his offensive line right now. And I don't entirely blame him, but he is also not entirely blameless in that. I think that the O-line and Worthy are the biggest stories of the remainder of the year for this offense. And I do join you in feeling better about Mahomes after that game, despite still seeing room for the ceiling to rise, which is a good thing when your quarterback is Patrick Mahomes and you haven't hit the ceiling yet and you're 5-0. That is something you should feel good about as a Chiefs fan.
Let's hit on the offensive line, but I want to touch on Worthy first.
Can I rip a comment real quick? Because I appreciate good perspective, because sometimes the comments are just not necessarily even just you guys, but in general, the comment section of the internet is often absolutely heinous. But Poor Axial, hope I got that close to right, says, this is what being a dynasty requires, though. That's it. I'm going to take that in two. I don't even know which specific thing that they're acknowledging. The two things a dynasty requires, and I'm with you here on this, is hyper-vigilant assessments of what's going right and what's going wrong, and well-rounded team games where different guys step up. The latter is something that we've talked about. The former is what we're going into now. And again, comments have been good today from what I've seen. I can see them over here easier now, which is cool. Sometimes you can say the greatest quarterback in the world, who I believe will one day be regarded widely as the greatest quarterback of all time, he has not had a great 5 games or a great 3 games from weeks 2, 3, and 4.
Yeah.
You can acknowledge that. He can acknowledge that. Andy Reid and Matt Nagy can acknowledge that, because that's the standard they've set there. And I just think that that's a great thing to be able to acknowledge as we're talking about this, that both the Chiefs standard is different as a luxury and that the Chiefs standard is different as a necessity. I think that's important.
Yeah. Again, before the offensive line, Xavier Worthy, really quickly, I'm with you, and I love the fact that he's not just a receiver, or he's not just a fast receiver.
Yes.
He's a really good wide receiver who happens to also be fast. He can get open. He is not just a John Ross, or he's a functionally fast receiver. There's a difference there. He uses it to get open, but it's not just straight line speed. I love the little moves he makes, the nuances, the ability to slow down and then speed up. And I'm glad that Andy Reid got the ball in his hands when Mahomes didn't, right? Saying like, you know what? All right, if Mahomes isn't necessarily trusting the deep ball to him quite yet, well, how about we try to find a way to still get the ball into his hands? I do think that is noticeable, and I do think after the bye, or at least as the season goes on, we will see that trust grow. It did with Rashi Rice last year, right? That's really when it took off. So I'm with you in that regard. To the offensive line point, I think the offensive line, for the most part, has been pretty darn good. I really do. Like if you're, I don't want to say assessing blame, but if you're wondering like, why is Mahomes leaving so early versus is it the offensive line collapsing? A lot of times I think it might just be Mahomes leaving early. And I think the offensive line's done a pretty dang good job. The issues are Juwan Taylor with penalties. I mean, just absurd. He was flagged at least twice last night, correct? Yes. I thought it was going to be a third, but it ended up being on, I think, Trey Smith instead of getting called on him. Again, I was at the game.
There was definitely a false start, and there was definitely a hold. Andy was pissed about a false start, and then the hold came after that, I think.
The false start, though, I thought from where I was at, looked pretty obvious. I go right when he did. Before they even the flag, I go, that's false start in 74.
The ball got back to Mahomes as he was moving. It wasn't the most egregious, but I'm never surprised when they called it.
I'm just saying the way it looked from my angle, I was like, that's a false start. It looked like one. Is my point.
I mean, it was, yeah.
So that still needs to get cleaned up, because the issue with Juwan is he's talented enough that should not be a continuous issue. He is a really good right tackle when he's not having penalties. Like, you cannot have that caveat if you're getting paid that much money. He is a damn good right tackle. Like, I how often have you been like, yo, dang, he just got bull rushed or he just got destroyed? Very rarely. It's always the penalties. I thought Trey, Creed, Joe, they've been solid this year, right? And then honestly, Wanya Morris has done a really nice job. I know some people have kind of gone back and forth with this. I've not seen what PFF said this week. I know the past couple, they've really been down on Wanya, and I think it's kind of unfair. It almost seems like they're just using the name and not like what he's done. Like, maybe I'm wrong here, but I thought Morris has been pretty damn solid. It looked like he was solid in this game as well. I don't know your thoughts, but when Wanya went down, I actually was nervous, right? I go, oh no. And I don't know how many people had that thought, how many people would have had that thought going into this season. You're in week 5, but that's how solid Morris has been in my eyes, that when he went down, I said, oh no, I don't know if we can trust the first, or I guess the second round left tackle that the Chiefs just drafted.
Yeah. I will be interested to see if we can get some like pressure numbers, and maybe we get a little bye-week breakdown of the offensive line, that we can kind of get some more concrete answers. The things I'll add into the mix is that against the Chargers, the interior, at least the guards, did not seem to play very well. The depth of the pocket seemed to be a problem, and the PFF grades reflected that. Again, I'm not gospel, but it can be useful. Against the Saints, it felt like there were far too many moments. There was one clip from early in the game, somewhere in the first half, I think, where it legit looked like Mahomes was playing Dance Dance Revolution in the pocket, and nothing was flying at him. Like, it was just red, and they were moving. I mean, offensive linemen moved to stay between the defender and the quarterback, but he had time, and he was back there dancing, like legit.
It was like you and me at the wedding. It was like you and me at the wedding, just, yeah.
He was on the dance floor. I think he has a little bit of baggage right now from week 2. I think the fact that his blind side was absolutely abused by a really good rusher against a rookie left tackle, I think that probably has some ramifications. And I think that can also coincide with the fact that the receiving room is also a question now. The theme of the offense, I think, in general, could be trust issues, where Mahomes has earned some of those. Again, week 2, kind of loses faith in Kingsley. I get it. Well, now it's 1. Then the Chargers do some more interesting stuff with their pressures, where they start to bring interior rushers around the edge. So Mahomes looks like he has a chance to escape, but then all of a sudden you got a defender there in your way, and now he can't actually go that way, and it looks like pressure that really Mahomes created. He's had some happy feet. He's had some rough stretches with the O-line. I don't think it requires a whole lot of mental gymnastics to understand Joe Thuney probably taking a step back. He's, I think, 31, but more important than the age, these are his first 5 games back from a torn pec that kept him out of almost the entire offseason. And not to make this another Nick Bolton thing, or Justin Reed for that matter, Bolton and Reed had their training camp or pre-training camp injuries, respectively, but it was an elbow for Bolton, right? You can talk about knocking off the rust. That's him getting up to speed and football speed again, right? A guard with a pectoral injury getting up to full capacity is a different thing. Nick Bolton uses his arms to shed blocks and make tackles and all of that, but the elbow wasn't the reason he was slow in week 1. Joe Thuney might be operating at a lesser power level right now, the Terminator that he is. If he does it, guys, do a bench press motion. Realize what's happening to your pecs. That's what you're doing in the trenches 24/7. And I mentioned this last week that, Trey Smith's strength isn't necessarily in pass blocking, even though seemed all right to me on Monday night. I have not had a chance to review that with my eyes specifically on the O-line, but I think it is a mix. I can't decide what the ratio is. I've gone back and forth from 80-20 in each direction at times this season in terms of, is it more on the O-line or is it more on Mahomes feeling pressure that's not there? But I think if he can settle down, and we saw it a couple plays against the Saints as well, if he can settle his feet down a bit and really keep his eyes up. This was something we talked about a ton in the final Alex Smith years, right? Keep his eyes up, keep his feet calm, and then escape when the moment calls for it. That's a very, very high standard. It's a very difficult thing to do, but that's the standard Mahomes has set by being the best quarterback we've ever seen, and so his standard is higher than most.
I want to get into the Rashi Rice injury. Pete Sweeney had an update during this show so far, about 20 minutes ago. Pete Sweeney says, confirming several reports of Chiefs wide receiver Rashi Rice undergoing successful surgery on his LCL. Quote, the good news is no damage to the ACL, MCL, or meniscus, and there is an expectation of no long-term issues stemming from the injury. Goes on to say Rice's estimated recovery time is 4 months, but it could reasonably stretch longer. There should be a clearer picture of Rice's outlook come December, end quote. Again, basically confirming, hey, it's not worst case scenario. This is not a Nick Chubb situation. Right. This is not a J.K. Dobbins situation, but it's still not ideal.
No.
Right. So that I think a lot of people, when Adam Schefter, I believe it was Schefter yesterday, tweeted out like,
sure effing was. Yeah. I have some thoughts.
Well, I think people were freaking out, and I think he didn't necessarily, in my opinion, say anything wrong. Like
you got the point wrong, though. Because you could say it's not the worst case scenario that it's not Nick Chubb. And I'd say, actually, Sterling, the worst case scenario would have been if they had to amputate. And then somebody else could say, actually, Josh, the worst case scenario could have been like them putting him down like a racehorse. Like the whole best case scenario, worst case scenario thing. And the insiders have been all screwed up on this for the last full week and change now. No one has been able to actually put all the facts in one cohesive report. So you have a whole bunch of people with these half reports, half explained, not Pete's there. That's real. And Nate Taylor had basically the same timeline about an hour ago on 4 months approximately. In fact, I have a physical therapist friend who just texted me a little bit earlier and was like, yeah, this kind of puts it to right after the Super Bowl, probably.
Sure.
So even in a quote, best case scenario, it is not the worst case scenario for Rashi Rice and for his rehab. But for the 2024 Kansas City Chiefs, this is effectively no different than it being an ACL, right? He's probably not going to be playing for the first 8 weeks of next season anyway, 6 weeks, 4 weeks, wherever it ends up. So sure. I think our conversation here can be whatever. I think Schefter shot a half-cocked gun and then had to patch it up 5 minutes later. And I think that's been pretty much par for the course for how this Jordan Schultz, whenever he had the first report that the surgery was finished, and he said it will knock Rashi Rice out for the remainder of the regular season. Hey, bud, what does that mean? So does that mean he'll be back for the playoffs? Because with Hollywood, we've been talking about he's out for the rest of the season. Maybe late regular season, and maybe he's around for the playoffs. When you have the news here, you're trying to get your retweets and get your Twitter clout here. When you say he's out for the remainder of the regular season, you are implying something else about the Chiefs are going to make the postseason, folks. Like, I just want these guys, and it's so frustrating also because it's not good or important reporting. It's getting texts from the people who find things out.
Sure.
If you have the news, get it right before you put it out there. Our entire media landscape from a national basis is deeply discouraging to me because it cares about all the worst things. But Adam says, worst case scenario is Alex Smith situations. Yes, that's a lot closer to a worst case scenario because they did almost have to amputate and he could have died. Rashi Rice having one less serious ligament damaged can still be framed as, for Rashi Rice, largely good news. But responsible, clear reporting never would have had that be a problem.
Sure. I
don't think we disagree about any of this.
No.
I'm furious about how this has been handled nationally.
Yes, I think I'm lockstep with you 99% of the way. I do think, again, Adam Schefter's I had less of an issue with than some of the other ones.
Why did he have to clarify it 5 minutes later then? If it was a good report, why did he have to clarify it 5 minutes after?
I think for that exact reason. He could have put it all in one original
I'm not sure
tweet.
He had it all in one original tweet. I think he had what he had, and it was time to get that Twitter machine going.
And then he got the 5, and then you think he got the other one 5 minutes. That's also fine.
Or he clarified, he tweeted out what he had, and then he texted his source to say, hey, can you clarify what this means? When in reality, he should have started there. Again, just responsible reporting, because this stuff matters.
What this does mean, he should be good to go. Suspension notwithstanding, yes. Good to go at the start of next year, as well as OTAs, training camp, preseason, all that stuff. That's great news because if a lot of the other L's were torn, right? The ACL, MCL, meniscus, you're looking at a long recovery time that's maybe half of next year as well. And that's without the suspension, which still might end up being the case, but that would have been a rehab situation. How fresh does he come back? This is better news. Not great news, not perfect news, but better than I think what a lot of folks may have thought when it originally happened. My thought again was, there goes the ACL. Here's a 12-month recovery time, plus the ramp-up period, the getting back, all that stuff, right? It could have been worse. For this season, though, you're without Rashi, and you're without, during the regular season, for the majority of it at least, without Hollywood Brown. So now you know, right? Now there's at least now we know it wasn't best case scenario. It wasn't a strain. It wasn't one of those situations. What did the Chiefs do? Because you mentioned it. McCole played one snap. Or was it one offensive snap?
No, he played more than that, but he got like 4 targets on, I think, 6 routes that he ran.
Okay. And then you said
Sky Moore played even less.
Okay.
The Chiefs played 3 wide receivers. They let 3 receivers play real wide receiver in this game. And Justin Watson led the team in snaps, 0 targets. Did not record a statistic in this game. You will not find Justin Watson in the box score, but despite him being the highest snapping wide receiver on the team. Just a wild little quirk.
Phantom 1090, watching the show while in jury duty. Heck yeah, baby. Hell yeah.
I don't know how I feel about that.
Hell yeah. But what do the Chiefs do? Do they stick with JuJu and Xavier? Hopefully that Xavier just starts becoming more and more involved in the role. That 12 personnel and 13 personnel is the game plan, becoming more of a physicality on offense, with Kareem Hunt being really good, man. I mean, Kareem Hunt's been shockingly impressive. Carson Steele, when he holds onto the football, has been pretty effective. What do the Chiefs do? Because I think everyone expects these big names, which I don't think is reality. I don't. And then when you get down to the DeMarcus Robinsons or like the realistic possibilities, most of them, are they that much of an improvement over just the snaps being given to Watson or the snaps being given to McCole Hardman? I don't know how much they really are moving the needle there.
Why did the Chiefs not end up re-signing JuJu Smith-Schuster? What was the main reason?
Injury concerns with the knees.
Injury concerns, wear and tear on the knees. Kareem Hunt has had his own injury issues, and he is 85 years old by NFL running back standards. I don't think it is fair to those guys or responsible for everyone else to watch that game last night and to say, oh, nope, that's good. That's repeatable. That's enough. It's going to be a team effort. This takes nothing away from JuJu. I have the tweet to prove it and a slew of angry replies. Whenever JuJu was let go by the Patriots, I made a point then of I'd bring him back. Yeah, you don't know what's going on with Rice's suspension. We don't know where health is going to end up. He was a useful player here a couple years ago. Let's see what he can do in Kansas City. Some people were with it. Some people called me terrible names.
Well, that was actually regardless of what you said. Unrelated. They just call you terrible names in general. That's just
like, great point, you dumb, whatever. So I don't think that you can expect what happened last night to be the repeatable plan going forward, because I don't think you can ask JuJu to put up 130. I don't think you want to ask Travis Kelce to catch whatever it was, 7 or 8 passes. I don't think you want to make Patrick Mahomes scramble as much as he did, move the sticks on his own as much as he did. You want to build yourself a little bit of a talent cushion. And again, they only have 3 wide receivers on this roster right now who they're willing to treat like actual wide receivers. So I do still think that they have a need in depth and a need closer to the top. I'm not counting out Amari Cooper as unrealistic yet. He's like the most movable asset in the sport, and he would be an outlier by not being a former Andy Reid guy. I wish that he had some crossover in an Andy offense that we could harken back to now.
A year with Doug Peterson would have been lovely.
Something like that would have been good, yeah. But he is a veteran receiver who has played a lot of football and been in a lot of places. And I have to imagine, I've never heard anything to the contrary, at least. I have to imagine you can kind of trust what's going on between his ears to be a guy who could pick this up relatively quickly in a way that would be harder for Xavier Worthy, despite the fact that he played in like a real college offense too. It wasn't, the rookie Tyreek Hill experience or whatever. So I think there still does need to be a move here. I think it would be a mistake to see last night as something you can do 10 more times, 12 more times, all the way to a Super Bowl. I think Worthy's role can and should increase regardless. I think JuJu is this team's second best wide receiver right now, regardless, and maybe number 1, I guess. I'm kind of giving Worthy the benefit of the doubt with a ceiling there. JuJu also, you mentioned earlier, I think that pick was 90% on him. And he still had the best day of any wide receiver by a pretty wide margin, despite bump setting one to Colin Saunders. I think there does still need to be a move, though. I think that Cooper, you could probably get for a price that makes sense on a 1-year rental that is about going in for a 3-peat campaign without selling your soul for a Devontae Adams, who, even if he was with a different team, I'm not sure that the price. I don't think you want to be the highest bidder on Devontae Adams. I think the Jets are probably more desperate than the Chiefs are in that regard. But I think Cooper makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, Cooper does make sense. Again, it's the lack of a non-Chiefs.
It would be an outlier.
It'd be an outlier. And until I see the outlier, I'm going to be skeptical, even if that's the name that I think, again, we all want. Before we get out of here, a couple of just quick things that I find interesting. Colin Saunders' interception was incredible. It happened right in front of us, and we saw like when I mean in front of us, we're caddy corner in the end zone. You could see it. We're like, that's Colin Saunders. That's Colin. And then all of a sudden you see him run back, and I'm dying laughing. Me and Nat, it's not funny because the game was
funniest. It's the funniest 10-point swing or 13-point swing ultimately of all time.
Yes, and that we're like, it's not funny for the game, but we could not really stop laughing because you see this big boy just running, and he's fast. He is an athlete, and you see him. He used to play running back, I believe, in high school. So you see him changing the ball.
Backflips before the draft, by the way.
Yes, but you see him changing the ball and holding it tight like an actual running back. And at one point, his corner, I think it was a cornerback, was trying to like tell him like, follow my block. And at one point, Colin Saunders just stiff arms his own teammate out of the way. Like, you know what? I'm going. I don't care. I'm going past you, boy. Like you can block that guy. I'm already going to be past y'all. Like he was booking. It was hilarious. You see Mahomes too, backing up, like not trying to tackle because of the obviously Rashi Rice situation, but he was almost the last guy. Mahomes almost became the last guy in this little backing move. And I was like, this is wild. It's not Tyrann Mathieu. It's not Willie Gay. Which former Chief's going to end up with an interception? It's Colin Saunders.
They started calling Carson Steele Kareem Hunt. Colin Saunders more like cookies and Kareem Hunt, huh?
I wish I had a
cookies and cream Hunt.
I got the cricket noise. I wish I had like a boo button. I need to add a boo button to this thing. It's also spooky season, so boo button would be really good. I also have a really fun interview I did with Joe Montana. Really enjoyable. Talked a lot of Chiefs with Joe. Talked a little 49ers. Talked about the three-peat, obviously, because he had a chance to three-peat before he got injured. Had a really fun story. My mom actually was a big driving force behind when he came to Kansas City, getting a town in Montana to change their name to Joe. So at one point, there actually was a Joe Montana. And I asked him if he ever remembered the story, and he lit up, was like, oh my gosh, yeah, that's hilarious. I believe we actually flew them all out to a Chiefs game at one point. He's like, I don't know how many people went. I don't think it was that much. And I'm like, well, Joe, the town was a town of 20 people. I think the entire town came out. So it was just a very fun conversation with Joe Montana. Obviously, Joe Cool, which he says he prefers Joe Cool compared to the comeback kid. I said, is it more like comeback man now at this point? Like, because the age.
Joe
I don't know if you like that one quite as much, but a lot of fun with Joe. If you want more Brisco, too, make sure you check him out on Only Weird Games coming up at around, 4:40?
We'll call it 4:40, just me and Nate today, so we'll get some real ball talk and get the lawyer out of there.
Ooh, Ronald.
One of his 45 kids.
Shout out to Ronald, says, saw that good interview for what it's worth. See, Ronald knows. Brisco, this was fun, baby. I enjoyed this. I'm glad you're able to make it to the wedding. I forgot to give you a cinnamon roll early because I actually, at Brisco's wedding, I ate their cinnamon roll cake, which was supposed to be like their wedding cake. Yeah. And I ate it as I walked in.
Yeah,
like yes, an hors d'oeuvre. Correctly. As I walked in, I grabbed one.
Not part of the cocktail hour. We had a lot of snacks in the cocktail hour. That was not one of them. No, look, your cinnamon roll sins have been forgiven both by me and by Renee. And we I think got our money's worth from your guys' bar. I told you this at the time. I'll say it again now. I think you guys had the best plate of wedding food I've ever had. A truly remarkably good steak, some great desserts. Tried both of those, of course, obviously. Got a little candy on the way out. So no, I think we're all good and even now. And it was great to get to be there and see the big day.
Hey, thank you, Brisco. Appreciate it. Thank you, everyone here, for listening, for hanging out with us. Chat, awesome as always. Make sure you listen to more Brisco a little later on today in just over a half hour. I'll be back tomorrow on Wednesday with Adam Best. Until next time, we are out.